Drake Bell is without a doubt one of the most complex cases to be analyzed on the internet. Famous for his participation in the show Drake and Josh, Bell had his reputation destroyed after pleading guilty in 2021 in a child endangerment case, but raised a lot of sympathy and support after reporting having been a victim of sexual abuse as a teenager, which leads to an obvious question. Does having been a victim of a horrendous case justify or in any way minimize replicating this behavior on third parties? Or at least that's what the internet is saying. Stay with us to better understand this story. But first, I would just like to ask you to subscribe to the channel, leave a thumbs up, and click the bell. Now let's get to our content. The start. Drake Bell has always been an ambitious boy. Since his creation, his main dream was to be a star, and his work quickly began to pay off, since at the age of 9, he was already involved in acting projects. His first truly successful project was The Amanda Show, when he was just 13 years old. But even though this may seem like just a simple success story, this early exposure to the world of entertainment and fame introduced him to a world of depravity that he should never have known, to be seen by someone so young. The downfall. The entertainment industry, often seen as a realm of glitz and glamour, has a darker side that is not always apparent to the public. The story of Drake Bell and Brian Peck, as revealed in the documentary Quiet on Set: The Dark Side of TV, is a stark example of how the world of Hollywood can sometimes harbor deeply troubling relationships. Bell was transitioning from a child actor to a teen idol, a period when guidance and mentorship were crucial. Enter Brian Peck, a seasoned actor and dialogue coach who had worked on numerous television shows, including popular Nickelodeon productions. Peck's role in these shows often involved working closely with young actors, helping them hone their craft and improve their performances. Drake became increasingly close to Brian, with countless rehearsals at his house, which would be a little beside the point if we consider that initially it was a strictly professional relationship, and that even understanding the importance of rehearsals, a teenager going weekly meeting in the home of an adult man without any type of supervision is inappropriate to say the least. The one who shared this thought was Drake's father, Joe Bell, who at that time was his manager, and tried to warn Drake of his bad feelings about this relationship. But each day, Brian was gaining a little more the mind of a teenage Drake, even accusing his father of being homophobic. And as at that time it is common to see children have poor communication, these problems increasingly separated Drake from his father. Brian used his power and influence to manipulate Drake into doing the worst possible things you can imagine.
That's where I would usually sleep, and I woke up to him. I just opened my eyes, I woke up, and he was sexually assaulting me. Why don't you think of the worst stuff that someone can do to somebody as a sexual assault? And that'll answer your question.
This abuse occurred for years and in silence on Drake's part, partially because he felt ashamed of the whole situation, and partially because of threats from Brian to destroy his career, which may not make much sense at first glance, as Drake at that time point was already one of Nickelodeon's most famous stars, starring Drake and Josh, while Brian, although a respected name in the industry, would hardly carry the power to destroy the career of a rising star, as Drake was at that time. But we are clear, speaking of a teenager, who could very easily be manipulated into believing this. After almost collapsing, Drake told his mother about the situation, who, horrified, took the case to the authorities. Brian Peck went to court in 2004, charged with lewd acts against a young actor because Drake's identity was covered up during that period. Peck was sentenced to a prison term of 3 years. In addition to his incarceration, Peck was required to register as a sex offender. But the worst part of it all was the support that Peck received from the industry, even after the conviction, with actors like Corey Feldman, James Marsden, and Corey Haim, stating that they never believed that Peck was capable of such absurdity. And the most revolting thing about this whole situation is that even after his conviction, he was hired to work on the Disney Channel teen sitcom, The Sweet Life of Zach and Cody. Literally a predator, he has been accepted again to work alongside children and potentially destroy more people's lives. But for Drake, that whole nightmare seemed to have passed. But the truth is that the drama of his life was just about to begin. Life after fame. With the Peck case covered up, Drake was just a rising star, being the pretty face of not just Drake and Josh, but all of Nick. With his music career gaining more prominence, Drake seemed to just be writing the beginning of a very successful story in one of the most complex industries in the world. But everything started to go wrong in 2007 at the end of the series. The truth is that although Drake had roles in relatively successful films, he never managed to gain the popularity he once had when he was the protagonist in Drake and Josh, and all that success that had once fed him at that time was basically a shadow in your life. Bell began to give in more and more to his problems with alcohol, being arrested for drunk driving on 2 different occasions. And even though he had moderate success with his band on Latin soil, nothing was able to make him deal with the demons of your head. One of the moments that best revealed this was the audio of his ex, Melissa Lingafelt, which is now deleted.
When I started dating Drake, I was 16. I was homeschooled. I moved in with him. I was singing. It wasn't until about a year when the verbal abuse started. And when I say verbal abuse, imagine the worst type of verbal abuse you could ever imagine, and that was what I got. It then turned into physical, hitting, throwing, everything. At the pinnacle of it, he dragged me down the stairs of our house in Los Feliz. My face hit every step on the way down. I have photos of this. I don't even want to get into the underage girls thing. I mean, I will, but I'm scared.
The complicated crime cycle of Drake Bell. There are a few points about this audio. The first is to highlight that although these are very serious allegations, no concrete evidence has been presented that this has occurred. Therefore, it would not be fair to take all of these statements as absolute truth. However, the last part about underage girls, even though they had not been tested on that occasion, they ended up gaining great strength due to what would happen next. Drake Bell plea hearing. It's no secret that Nickelodeon sitcoms attract a very young audience, and because Drake was a teenage heartthrob, there would be many approaches from underage girls who admired him and naturally sought some form of contact. I believe it wouldn't be too much to ask for a grown man not to respond to or entertain a conversation with a minor. But honestly, I believe that showing the account in which Drake admitted guilt is the best description.
This portion of my statement explains how he started grooming me when I was 12 years old. I started off as a fan of him. I was definitely one of his biggest fans. Everyone who knew me as a child knew that he was a hero to me. I would have done anything for him. That led to my aunt taking me to meet him for the first time in 2014 when I was 12. I adored him, and he instantly made me feel that he adored me right back. From the time I was 12 to 15, my aunt took me to meet him and spend time with him many times. After I met him for the first time, he started speaking to me more frequently online. I confided in him about very personal things about myself. In the summer of 2017, I messaged him, telling him that I was going to see him in concert in the following months. He replied by telling me that he couldn't wait to see me. He also asked me, quote, "How old are you now?" I told him 15. He then told me to, quote, "Hurry up, don't smile at me." Not too long after that, his messages to me became blatantly sexual. This eventually led to many months of inappropriate messages and photos being exchanged over Instagram and Snapchat. The photos exchanged included photos of my body and photos of his body and his genitals.
And even after pleading guilty to these charges, Drake tried to explain himself in the most inadequate way possible.
It was so construed and taken out of context, and things were left out when it was being when things were being reported, and it created a complete narrative that is absolutely not the case, not true. I had found myself in some hot water when I was, being stupid and responded to somebody who had created a Finsta, like a fake Instagram, and were sending me, messages, and I had responded, but that's all it was. It was just just some text messages. And
firstly, let's deal with this as it is, pure nonsense. Just a few texts applies when you drink and text your ex, not when you exchange sexual messages with an underage girl. And regardless of any argument you want to create, if you analyze this case in isolation, there is no perspective in which this situation is not deplorable. The end. In the end, things get complex, as I just mentioned. If you analyze his judgment in isolation, there is nothing that can be used to defend Drake. However, life is not made up of an isolated event. But in a sequence of them, it would be very easy to ignore everything that Drake went through in his life and simply want to paint him as a villain because of parts of his actions. In the same way that it wouldn't be difficult to just think about all the suffering he went through in his adolescence and redeeming any act he has committed with other people, which is what the internet seems to have done. I believe that the demons that Drake carries due to the abuse he experienced will always carry a huge weight in his feelings and may have influenced his self-destructive behavior, and that also destroyed other people. Most of the time, we usually say that there is no right or wrong side, but in this specific case, I believe that Drake finds himself in both aspects. In any case, all I wish is that you learned from your mistakes and that you can find peace, even after everything that has happened.